Episode 4 of The Mystery of God's Grace is part 2 of the story of Craig Daliessio.
Then the abuse really got bad for my daughter, and so I couldn't leave town. There was no work in Nashville. I couldn't find anything, and I lost my house, and I wasn't going to leave town, and so I couldn't find any work enough to get an apartment or anything. I was working, pressure washing houses. I built a chicken coop. I got hired 3 different times from 3 companies, and they went out of business.
If you haven't heard the first part of Craig's story, check out episode 3 of The Mystery of God's Grace. Hi, this is Shari McGuire. Craig Daliessio's life has been an intricate tapestry of challenges, resilience, and the enduring power of hope, woven together by the threads of God's unwavering grace. His childhood was marked by an absence of love and acceptance, leaving him yearning for emotional connection and belonging. Gratefully, he had a grandma who would teach him Sunday school songs and read the Bible with him, and so from a young age, Craig always felt a connection with God. As if his childhood trials weren't enough, Craig faced financial ruin during the housing market crash, losing his job and home. For years, he was forced to live in his car, battling homelessness and the harsh realities of life on the streets. Throughout this relentless onslaught of adversity, Craig never lost sight of hope and sought solace and guidance in his relationship with God. During his time living in his car, he wrote 5 books, and he believes God is using them now to give others hope, even in their adversity.
She's a great nurse, and I can't take that away from her. She is a fantastic nurse, but she has gotten by with being beautiful her whole life. She's never had to be a good person because she's beautiful. And it's not like she was Cruella de Vil, but she just basic integrity things and kindness and she's done things to our daughters. They don't even speak. They're
Oh, really?
yeah. They just my daughter told her she went back with her second ex-husband. They're back together.
Okay.
He was very abusive to my daughter. I mean, it killed one of her pets. Like just weird,
Oh my
sick stuff.
gosh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
How old was she when that happened?
She was in 2nd grade, so she would have
Oh
been.
my gosh.
No, she was a little older than that. She was probably 10.
Wow.
Yeah, 9 or 10. And Holly went back with him, and she told her, when she got wind of it, that they were talking again because they have a child together. She said, if you go back with him, I won't be a part of your life because it's me or him. And she said, well, I'm going to get back with Jeff. She's very matter of fact about it. Like it didn't even bother her.
Mm.
And it's sad is that I swore I'd never marry my mom, and I didn't think I was marrying my mom. And I married my mom. My mother did the same thing. My mother, I haven't talked to my mother in 18 years, and it doesn't even bother her. I was homeless for 6 years, and she knew about it. She knew everything that was going on, and I never heard from her once. And
Really?
yeah, it's just there was just no maternal instinct there. I was a chip in the game, and the only that normally that would probably destroy some people, but one of the things God showed me in the process of all this was this is part of His plan. I'm His son. In 1993, one of my best friends growing up, her and her husband, I didn't even know this. I had not seen Pam in years, and I ended up trying a new church, and I went to church with them, and I ran into Pam and her husband, and we were talking one night. I don't even know, like the conversation was just something about some of my friends. I was holding one of my friends' babies. He was like a year old, and my friend's like, "Man, you're such a good, you'd be a great dad." Like I didn't have any kids then at the time. I wasn't married. And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to give it one more year," because I was 29. I said, "I'm going to give it one more year, and if I don't have, I'm not married with a kid on the way by next year, I'm going to adopt." Well, Pam was sitting next to me, and she thought I was serious. I was kidding. So she looked at me. She goes, "Have you looked into it?" Because Foley and I, it's her husband, Foley and I are thinking about adopting. I said, "No, I'm kidding. I'm not. I really, I'd like to at least be married and try first, And she explained to me that they'd been trying for 7 years to have baby, and they couldn't. And there was some more pieces to that, but I 2 weeks before that, we were praying. It was in church, and Pam was at the altar, and a bunch of women had gathered around her and put their hands on her, and they were praying for her. And I felt this really strong move of the Holy Spirit to go tell her to get ready to have a baby. And I said, God, I can't tell Pam that. Like, what's Foley's going to hear that? Like, come over and beat me up. Like, how do you mean that? And so I sat on that. I didn't say anything. And when she said that to me that night, I had no idea they were struggling to have children. I didn't know that's why she was praying at the altar. I didn't know the story. I just started going to church there. And we hadn't talked since high school camp. So it was 10 years. So I get tears in my eyes. I said, Pam, I'm so sorry. I said, you're going to think this is crazy, but, and I told her that story. I said, 2 weeks ago on Sunday night, when all the women were praying for you, I was supposed to tell you to get ready to have a baby. Well, she starts bawling. She said, you're the fourth person this week that told me that same message from God. So that was
Ah,
February of 93. March of 93, church softball season starts. We're at our softball game. April, it was a little bit warmer. She's always there, right? Fully was our pitcher. And Pam never missed a game. Well, Pam wasn't there. So I said, Foley, where's Pam at? He said, she's at the doctor. She'll be here a little bit late. So she shows up. She waves to Foley. He goes over, comes back to the dugout. And he's just all smiles. He's like, Pam's pregnant. Like, what? He told the whole guys, right? So they had decided to try, after four people had delivered the same message from God. They decided to try a different doctor. And they went to
oh,
this other doctor who said, Pam, your problem is you're hyperthyroid and you're not ovulating. Your ovulation is lasting like 28 seconds, and that's,
oh,
so they put her on some stuff, slowed everything down, and she got pregnant. They had twins. So that
oh,
was
wow.
April of 93. She was pregnant. They were due in December. They were premature. It was a difficult pregnancy. There was emergency prayers for Pam and Foley a lot of times during that 9 months. But they finally were born, and they couldn't even come to church. They were in, NICU for a while,
Sure.
but they were finally okay, and they came home, and it was May of 94, and we had a baby dedication service for them, and they were up at the altar, and it was Pam's mom and dad and Foley's mom and dad and the twins, boy and a girl, Kelsey and Ryan. And I was in the very back, and I was watching this. A church of about 400 people, and about 300 of them were at the. Pastor Walters said, "If any of you want to come up," he said, "I never do this, but if any of you want to come up, we feel like these are all our babies because we prayed so hard for them, and so come up and circle around them, and as we dedicate them, and if you want to stretch your hand out towards them." So they did. I just didn't want to get up in that madhouse, so I sat in the back and watched, and I started getting real sad. I got tears in my eyes. I said, God, was anybody this happy when I was born? I wasn't a good thing for
Oh,
anybody. My mom didn't want me. My dad didn't want any parts of that. He wanted to just go back to college. He wanted to be a school teacher. He had a plan for his life. And my mom just wanted him to marry her. And now she's stuck with a kid. And all these things was, we didn't have a baby dedication for me. Was anybody happy that I was born? We never celebrated my birthday. And I always could
oh,
never
really?
understand. Yeah, never. I never could
Would they
understand.
celebrate your siblings' birthdays?
Yes. And I never could figure that
Really?
out. I finally asked my mom one time. I said, how come we don't do my birthday? And she said, well, your birthday comes the first week of school. My birthday's September 7th. And back then in Delaware, you didn't go to school till the Tuesday after Labor Day. She said, it's always at the first start of the school year, and it's a busy time. And I'm thinking, yeah, but every year there's always kids whose birthdays happen during the school year, and the mom comes in with the cupcakes, and you have a little party.
Yeah.
We never did. And as I wrote the book 2 years ago, I was praying my way through it, and I asked God that question one time. I said, God, how come we never did my birthday? And he told me, because your mom didn't want it. It wasn't a good day for her. She didn't like celebrating it. It meant nothing to your stepfather, and your mom didn't want to really celebrate it. So they just didn't do it. And I never, of course, I didn't know that. And then, but this day in May in '94, I'm watching Ryan and Kelsey dedicated, and I was praying, and I asked God that question, and he answered me with the lyrics of a song. It was the craziest thing. I said, God, was anybody happy that I was born? And I was big Rich Mullins fan. I don't know if you knew who Rich
Okay.
Mullins was,
Yep.
but
I know who he
right.
was.
So one of my best friends was in the Ragamuffins. He was an original Rag, my friend Rick Elias, and so I got to know. I mean, I can't tell you that Rich was a friend, but I knew him through Rick. And there's a song on his "The World Is Best I Remember It" Volume 2, and it's called "Sometimes by Step." And there's a line in that song, and I instantly heard it. I was literally singing it to myself. It popped in my head. It says, "Sometimes I think of Abraham, how one star he saw had been lit for me." And I'm like, all right, what's that mean? And he instantly pointed out Psalm 147:4, I think it is. Um, he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. He numbers the stars and calls them each by name. And I said, and that phrase, he numbers the stars and calls them each by name, appears 4 times in Scripture in 4 different verses of the Bible, 4 different books. There's once in Job, once in Psalms, once in Isaiah, and once in Daniel. And I was like, what does that mean? And God was just all of a sudden like answer after answer. I barely had time to ask the next question. I said, what does that mean? He said, I'm a covenant God. And he showed me Genesis 34, I think, where he makes the promise to Abraham. And it's the middle of the night, and he takes Abraham out of his tent and he takes him up to this big hill. And he says, look up at the stars and count them if you can. I will give you a child of promise for every star in the sky. And until that moment, I didn't understand that God was being literal when he said that to Abraham. That's
Mhm.
why he said, I number the stars and call them each by name. It makes sense to me that he knew the number of stars. He created them. And
Yeah.
he's infinite. So as soon as he said, let there be stars, that's not exactly how he said it, but the
No,
Genesis
but
account was like, let there be lesser lights above the greater light. Well, he knew how many that was. If it was, 8,297,000,000, whatever it was, God knew he's infinite. But he named them.
yeah.
Why would he name them? They're just stars. He named them because he knew, however many, there's some people that tell you that was just a few thousand years, or some people that say it was a couple million years between creation of the world and man. However many years that was, he knew when Abraham gets here and I make that promise to him that night that I'm being literal. And there's a star in the heavens that has my name on it. It's a marker that was given, 6,000 years ago to Abraham. And God's not a liar. And that day in church, that day, watching Pam and Foley and their son and daughter be dedicated, guess what God told me? He said, that's what he said. He said, what? I kept my word. There was a star. There's been a star in heaven with your name on it since I put stars in heaven. I always knew you were coming. I couldn't wait for you to get here. Maybe you weren't a good thing for your mom or your dad, but that's not who created you
Yeah.
in the first place. And I have a plan for your life. And I danced over you I rejoiced over you with singing and dancing. I guess in Zephaniah. And I wanted great, and I still have a great plan for you. And I had to bury my head. I walked to the very back. I stood against the wall of the church near the sound booth because it was a little bit darker and nobody could see me. And I sobbed. And I finally got out to my car. I couldn't stay in the church. I went out to my
Mm.
car and just sobbed. I believe that my name, in Revelation 11:12, it says the devil is overcome by the power of the blood. No, that's not the verse I'm thinking of. It was the one about where the people that were beheaded were there because they sacrificed their lives for the gospel. They were given a stone, a white stone, and on that stone was written their real name, the name that God knows them by. And I think that's the name of the star. It was from that day on, that was when the changes started happening, where I started seeing myself as more than just, you know, the son of Bob Daliessio and Kay Shenko. It was more like I was God's son. That's the channel that he used to bring them here. But, um, and that didn't fix everything immediately.
Mm.
At that
Yeah.
point, there was 31 years of damage done that had to be sorted through. But it fixed the view I had of God as a father. I projected my stepfather onto him my whole life,
Sure.
and he didn't like that. But it took 30 more years to fix the image I had of myself as a child of God, which was completely different from how I saw him as a father. But I never forgot that. And Rich died a couple years later and never got a chance to tell him that story. I told Rick, my buddy that knew him, that was in his band, and he was like, "Man, Rich would have loved that story," but I never got a chance to tell. But that's in my book. It's one of the things I tell. I
Okay.
tell. It's a hope giver for sure.
Well, yeah, what an incredible story. Like, it's got my cleaning so it's wow, just a great, great God story. So obviously, I mean, you hinted at it already. That didn't fix your whole life
No.
because you ended up homeless. So tell us how that happened.
Well, I'm a glutton for punishment. I was in the mortgage business from '98 to 2008. In 2008, the whole mortgage industry collapsed. It just fell apart. And the company I worked for, I had a branch with the largest privately funded mortgage company in the country. The only people bigger than us were like Countrywide and New Century, the really big, and Citi, those guys. But as far as the independent mortgage bankers, we were the biggest and the best. That's how I knew Johnny Fowler. Johnny worked
Oh,
there too,
okay.
and I met Johnny there.
Mhm.
I had a branch with them for 4 years, and then we were the Titanic and we were the iceberg. Like it was
Wow.
the mortgage industry collapse is what caused the banking collapse and the economy collapse. And so
Mhm.
we got hit first. Like I lost my job, and it was a good 6 to 8 months before other people started losing theirs. Like our industry really went under, and I couldn't find anything else. And my ex-wife had remarried by that point, 5 years prior, and my daughter was right in the middle. So her husband was very chemically dependent. He swore he was off of it. He was clean and sober, and he was for a couple of years, but he went back on it, and he lost his job. Of course, that that'll cause a guy to drink, I guess. But he then the abuse really got bad for my daughter, and so I couldn't leave town. There was no work in Nashville. I couldn't find anything, and I lost my house, and I wasn't going to leave town, and so I couldn't find any work enough to get an apartment or anything. I was working pressure washing houses. I built a chicken coop. I cleaned windows one time. I just tried everything I could. I got hired 3 different times from 3 companies, and they went out of business because the economy was just so bad. Gas was $4.50 a gallon, and I'd lost everything. A friend of mine gave me a car, an 850 Volvo, and that was all I had. And so I had to stay. So I had all my belongings in a storage facility, and I was scraping together enough money every month to pay that bill and try to eat. Sometimes eating was on a good day, I had enough money for the hot dog combo at Sam's Club. On a
Mhm.
bad day, I would just cruise around Sam's Club and eat the samples they give out at the end of, so I
Oh,
got somebody
sure.
passing out food, and or you like if you're really hungry, and it makes you bold, you go to the deli and act like you're going to buy some lunch meat. And just, oh, let me sample that
Um,
turkey. I don't like that. Let me try.
oh,
It's just, like you do that enough times, get a little food in you. But I had to stay because my daughter, Jeff had to know. It's my ex-wife's husband. He had to know, you're crossing some lines right now because I can't do anything about it. But there's certain lines if you cross, I don't care what happens to me. I will be in your house and take care of business, and I'll just wait for the cops to get there. Thankfully, he never.
mm,
And one thing he didn't do was touch my daughter inappropriately, but everything else was fair game. And she had to live with it, and I had to live with it because I couldn't do anything about it. And at one point, I was going to call the cops, and a friend of mine's a sheriff. She said, "Don't do it." I said, "Why?" She goes, "Because if you call the cops, they will ask you to take her with you, and if you tell them, and they'll check your address, and you don't have one, she will go in the foster care system, and you'll never get her back out."
oh,
And so she had to stay with her mom, and so she had to learn the art of hiding, which I hated, but she did. She had to hide, come home from school, go right to her room, or go somewhere else, stay with her friends. But
mhm.
um, so I had no choice but to stay, and staying meant that I couldn't afford to live anywhere. So I used the first 6 months. I hid my car behind this church that I used to go to, and it had this real tall grass, like 10 foot tall, like sawgrass, and I
Okay.
used to back my car into it, and the grass would spring back up again like a curtain, so you couldn't see me. And I was in there. I lived like that for about 6 months, and then a friend of mine found out. She said, if you want to park your car on my farm, she had like a 10-acre mini farm in Franklin. She said, just park here. You can park by the shed, and you'll be all right. So I did that and that was like the next 4 years, 5 years,
Wow.
5.5 years total. I was homeless,
Wow.
and
What'd you do for showers then?
I had a membership at the county rec center, which was only $150 a year. So I scraped together $150
Oh,
and paid that. So I could take a shower every
mm,
day. I didn't look homeless, and I was working enough to have gas money and maybe eat once in a while and shave and not, look the part. I was putting out literally every day, sending out resumes and applications. I probably had 100 interviews. I put out over 400 resumes. Um, and time after time, nothing would happen. Um, I did every job I could think of, and it just seemed like there were times that I thought it's just never going to change. This is my lot in life, and I don't know what to
wow.
think of, and it was so hard for me. My daughter was really in pain, and I couldn't fix it. And there were times that I'd get a phone call at 2 in the morning. Her mom would be like, "Come and get her out of here." She would side against her. And I
Wow.
go get her, knowing what am I going to do? I got to drive around for a couple hours till the sun comes up, take her home, let her get a shower, and take her to school. I can't keep her, and her mom knew that. Um, but I did what I had to do, and I was there for her. I talked to her every single day, either on the phone or I picked her up and took her to school. Or I couldn't see her on weekends anymore. Like I didn't have a place to stay, but I'd go pick her up. We'd go get a Coke or something at McDonald's. I did everything I could to remain in her life. I didn't tell her at first, but she found out. And that was a hard day for me. I normally I hid my sleeping bag and pillows and stuff in the trunk, and I'd forgotten to do that, but I tucked it behind my seat. I didn't think she'd see it. She saw it, and she asked me if I was homeless, and I had to tell her, yeah. But it was it went on. I mean, I went to school. I'm probably the only. I finished my degree when I was homeless. I went back and finished online. I think I'm still the only homeless graduate of Liberty University. They actually did a story on me when I graduated.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and and that didn't open any doors. Nothing seemed to work, and then
So,
couldn't live like that, and it just got really, really bad. And finally, the last straw came. Jeff had just gone a little too far, and I went to her mom. I said, "Look, I'm leaving. I've got enough connections at Liberty. I got enough friends there. I'm well connected in the area. They're hiring like crazy. I'm going to get a job." I said, "So I'm taking her with me. You can fight me over this and whatever, but you either let her go with me or just we'll just be on the back of a milk carton. I'll kidnap her, but we're going." And it was, she agreed that, Jeff was out of control and she needed to do something about it. And she, Daisy was in jeopardy. So she let her go with me, but I had to continue to pay child support, even though she was living
wow.
with me. Yeah. My ex-wife's
Um,
not nice, but we,
wow.
I got hired here and we limped into town with 2 months rent. My church that I was going to took a collection for us. I did some side work. With some carpentry. I've been a carpenter for years. And so I did some carpentry work and scraped some money together to get here on a truck that had no business even pulling a U-Haul trailer. It was crazy. And Liberty takes so long to hire. So I moved here in May of 2019 or 2014. And it was like August before they finally officially hired me. So
Oh,
all
wow.
summer, a friend of mine that I played hockey with here, he owns a construction business. He kept me busy. And we tried to make a normal life. I mean, we moved in, we had no furniture. She had a brand new bed, box spring and mattress that a friend of mine gave us, brand new. But I was still asleep. All I did was take the foam roll up stuff that I was sleeping on in my truck and put it in my bedroom. I still
Okay.
slept on the floor, but at least it was indoors. I was
Yeah.
showering indoors and I could cook dinner. First time in years I wasn't eating, cold stuff out of a can or Pop Tarts. That was like my regular meal. But you know what? We were here, we were together. It was real tough, but I didn't know how bad the damage was to my daughter. That's probably what hurt me the most. And
Mm.
it would come out over time, and I saw how hurt she was, how much damage had been done. That was tough. It's been hard. There were times I never asked God why me, because why not me? I mean, I have no reason to not suffer any more than anybody else or less than anybody else does. But I did want to know why. Like, why in the please tell me something good's going to come out of all this. Tell me somebody's watching, or I'm going to tell my story someday. It's going to change somebody's life. Because if this is for nothing other than just this is just what happens, a bad string of luck, whatever you want to call it, then it's not worth it to me. And
Mhm.
he never failed to bring people into my life that told. One of my best friends I played hockey with at Liberty, whose name is also Craig, um, called me one time when I got here to Virginia. He said, "I never told you this, but I've been watching the whole time. And you've made me a better dad." And he's a good dad. I mean, Craig's just one of the sweetest people in the world. He said, "I watched how you refused to give up, how much you love your daughter, and you endured so much just to stay in her life and be the barrier between her and destruction." He said, and I was watching, and you did a good job. And those words were worth millions to me. Like
Yeah.
I didn't realize anybody was watching. And the other good that came out of it, I love to write my whole life, and I never wrote anything. Other than high school assignments, I wrote of the 8 books I've written, I wrote 5 of them homeless.
Really?
I wrote 5 of them
Wow.
while I was homeless. Yeah,
And are they all
writing.
available on Amazon
Yeah,
now?
they're all on Amazon. Writing was very much an escape for me. It was I could. There's nobody to talk to. Homelessness is
Yeah.
the loneliest existence in the world. People
Sure.
don't even say. You go weeks without even somebody saying your first name because nobody talks to you. You go through your
Wow.
day. You become so beaten down you don't want to look anybody in the eye. I would go down Main Street in Franklin. Franklin, Tennessee is a great little town, and there's all these little old shops, and I would once in a while walk down and look over and see my reflection in the glass and duck my head. And it wasn't because I looked. Nobody knew I was homeless. I like I said, I shaved. But I knew. It's almost like the glass was reflecting my soul. And all I saw was this homeless guy that lost everything and couldn't even take care of his daughter. And it was shameful. And it
Yeah.
makes you want to retreat from people. I didn't want to talk to people. I thought everybody saw me. I felt like I was wearing the scarlet letter.
Mhm.
And it was such a lonely, isolating experience. And it was, writing was a way to speak to someone else. People would read it. And I started realizing I'm good at this. Like, I'm a good writer and I'm good with words. And I've gotten so much better. I read my first books now. I'm like, boy, I was good, but man, like I would have said that different. I would have said that different.
Uh,
But yeah, and I love to do it. And I think that is the ministry God called me to. Like, when I look back and I think, all right, I thought I was supposed to be in ministry, like, preaching at a church every Sunday.
mhm.
I think I'm supposed to write. My friend
Yeah.
Rick Elias, he's passed away, but have you ever seen the Tom Hanks movie, That Thing You Do? Rick did the
I don't think I
soundtrack for
saw it.
that. He
Okay.
wrote 5 of the songs. He was a Christian artist. He had 7 albums, and he was in Rich Mullins' Ragamuffin Band. And
Okay.
he used to say that writing a song was like prayer for him, that
Mm.
it was sacred. And for me, writing books and writing on my blog or whatever is the same. It's sacred for me. And I think that, of all the things that I discovered in my homelessness, it was that I loved my daughter even more than I thought I did, and I knew I loved her a lot. And B, that I love to write, and I think that's one of the reasons I was put here, and I'm good at it. Like, it took me a while to say that I'm good at it, but I'm good at it. So
Mhm. And God is certainly, you didn't want the story, but He gave you the story to share and
yeah,
hopefully help other people
yeah,
through that story.
yeah.
Um, so wow, um, just amazing that you made it through all of that,
It's,
and
it's-
and still
yeah.
have your faith. And so I guess talk to that a little bit, because I would think that would just really be hard to go through that long ago. God, what the heck, you know?
Well, I said worse than God, what the heck? Let me tell you, I've had people ask me, like, did you? They say, well, did you give it to God? Give it to God. I said, boy, you should have heard me giving it to God. Like, it was. There were times I say this. This is funny to me. I was driving down the road one night. I don't remember what happened. Something happened. I think I had a flat tire and I knew I couldn't afford to fix it. I was running on the donut, in a car that probably shouldn't even have been on the road, and all kind of stuff. And I got so mad at God, I flicked both middle fingers at the sky driving my car.
Oh no.
And then I started laughing at myself. Like, what was that? Like, why did I do that?
Mhm.
And I felt God laugh. Like, I felt like God be
Okay.
like, I get it. It's okay. And I understand you've hit a wall. And then there was another night. I used to go to, they used to call it Kinko's, but now it's FedEx
Oh
office.
yeah.
And that's where I did my homework for school. And it was early October. No, it was mid-October. And October's a weird month in Tennessee, in Nashville, because it can be very warm in the daytime, but then it get really cold at night. And so it had been a really warm day, and all I had was a hoodie. I think I had shorts on and a hoodie, and I was comfortable all day. But there had been a cold front come through, and by the time I got done my schoolwork, it was about 9:15. I put my hoodie on. Didn't know that a cold front had come through. I heard the wind kick up, but I walked outside to get in my car to go park at my friend's farm, and it was freezing. Like, it was probably 40
Mm.
degrees. All I had was a hoodie, and it was too late to get in my storage shed. It wasn't 24 hours, so I couldn't get into the storage facility and get some clothes. I got in my car. I was shivering uncontrollably that quickly.
Mm.
Like, it was that cold to
Wow.
me. And I broke down in tears. And it was probably the third year that I was homeless. And I remember crying and saying, God, I can't do this another winter. Winter's here, and I can't do this again. Winter's, there is no easy time to be homeless. You're either
No.
freezing in the car or it's so hot. I remember one night it was like July, and I was playing my friend Terry, who was with Terry Lancaster, who spoke in our group last week. I played on Terry's hockey team on a Sunday night men's league, and Terry once paid my league fee so I could play because I needed a little bit of normalcy. And I think he knew that. So being with the guys for a couple hours on Sunday night and then going to a restaurant afterwards and having some fries or something, it just felt like, for a few hours, I wasn't the homeless guy living in his
Yeah.
car. And one night I got back, we'd gone to dinner, and I got back, parked the car, and it was, by that point, the Volvo had died. I had this beat up old Yukon. At least it was big enough. I folded the seat, then I could sleep. I could stretch out and sleep in it. But
Mm.
it was hot, and I heard the storm start to come in, and I had to roll the windows up. The
Oh.
rain was coming. and it was stifling. And I mean, it was probably 100 degrees in that car at the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep. Woke up the next day, like I probably slept an hour and a half. It was miserable. Or I've slept in the wintertime. It was so cold that there'd be frost inside the car from my breath
Mm.
freezing on the windshield. I slept, coldest I ever slept was 5 below.
Or,
Um, yeah, it was really, really cold. And I, you know, I just remember telling God that one time, like, I can't do this again. And little did I know I was going to do it 3 more times, 3 more winters before it was all over.
mhm.
Um, it was hard. I, and I didn't never ask God why me, because like I said, but there was times I would ask, like, what's the point in all this? Please tell me there's a purpose to this. This isn't just me, my turn at the bottom of the barrel. And, you know, I think one of the things I did was that's where I really started to see myself as an orphaned child. That,
Okay.
my Heavenly Father's up there. He sees what I'm going through, but I don't matter. It's not him, it's me. There's something wrong with me. I'm not a good enough kid that he would fix this for me. And I never prayed about it. I never prayed, God, get me out of here. God, fix this. I would pray, God, I need a job. I'd go for an interview and pray that God would open the door, but never once said, God, I'm tired of being homeless. Can you please fix this? I would do it for everybody else. I would go to homeless ministries. Our church did this thing called Room at the Inn. In the coldest months, they would take the overflow. When the men's shelter got too full in Nashville, in town, we had a bus. We would run in and pick up like 24 guys, bring them back to our multi-purpose room. They had washing machines. They could do their clothes,
Um,
home cooked meals, a great thing. And I would be there. My church invited me to come and be a part of it because I had so much in common with them. And I'd pray with these guys. I'd pray for them that their homelessness would end, that they reunite with their family. But I never prayed for myself for that. And
interesting.
I just didn't think I was deserving of it. And I, I that was probably the hardest part, is I really did feel going through that I deserved it. There were times when I would wake up in the middle of the night and think, what if this is always going to be this way? Like, what if this is the last chapter of my life and I never get out of this? And it was like, maybe you deserve that. Like, that's all I deserved. That's all. I wasn't worth being outraged that I was homeless. Well, you should be. You know, I don't know why. I don't know why I couldn't point to something in my life saying, "See, you should be homeless." I just felt like, don't ask God for that. Who are you to complain that you're homeless? And oh gosh, my phone. So yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thanks for asking me to.
And I pray that it inspires other people that God really does love us and care for us, and He's there. He's named a star for us in
Yes,
the sky long before our parents were even born, and our
yeah.
grandparents and great grandparents. And are there any final thoughts you want to leave with people for hope?
If there's anything I've learned, I learned it writing the last book. And it's funny because I thought that's my best book by far and the most important spiritually. And it's probably done the worst sales wise. But everybody that's read it I've gotten so many emails and personal contacts from people whose lives it changed drastically. That
Mm,
apparently spiritual orphanage is a lot more widespread than we realize.
wow.
And the one thing I learned in all of it was how much God really loves me, how much of a beloved child I am of His. And I'll tell you the story really quick. I had written the book for 8 months. It was a couple days after my dad died, and my dad died right towards the end of me writing the book, and which made it really even harder. I'd always hoped we would have some kind of a relationship, and writing the book, I kind of hoped that we'd get some peace from it. But he died, and a couple days after, I get up very early. You know that because you guys
Mhm.
always see my posts. I'm posting things at
Yeah.
4:30 in the morning. Um, I was sitting on my couch and I said, God, I've been writing this thing for 8 months and I obeyed you writing this. I felt God tell me I'm not going to heal you first. I asked him, I said, shouldn't you heal me first? And then I'll write the book. He said, nope, I'm going to heal you while you write it because it needs to be raw and painful. I said,
Mm,
okay. So I'm sitting on my couch one morning and I said, enough. My dad's gone now. I'm never going to have a relationship with him. Um, I need something. It's time to bring this thing home. And I'm tired of being an orphan. but I don't know what it looks like. And what does it look like to be your child? And all of a sudden I had this extremely vivid memory. And it really happened. This wasn't like some trance vision. It's just that God prompted my memory. This actually happened. My daughter was 4 years old. We were in our house in Tennessee oh gosh, I love my house. Well, we were in our house that it was the second home I owned in Tennessee. And it was just our favorite. And it was a Saturday. It was my weekend with her. And I was in my spare bedroom office, and she was watching cartoons. She comes running in my office, jumps up in my lap, says, "Daddy, can I have a Barbie Jeep?" And it had been on my radar because she was at the Barbie age and she already had a Power Wheels. It was like a quad racer, but the Barbie Jeep was really cool. And I said, "Well, look, I can't go get one today. They're pretty expensive back then. But how about if we put it on your Christmas list?" It was kind of like October, early November. I said, "How about if we put it on your Christmas list? And either Daddy or Santa will get it for you." And she said, "Okay." She gave me a big hug and she ran back in to watch TV. And I sat there remembering that, and I heard God tell me, like, think about that. How did she do it? She ran into my office. She didn't think about whether she was interrupting me. She didn't think she had to approach me on her knees, begging and groveling. She didn't come up to me and say, "Daddy, if I'm good, if I clean my room, if I get straight A's, if I go 4 for 4 in the baseball game this year, if I whatever, look, for me, I'm thinking how I used to reason with things, be a good son, if I clean my room, if I take care of the dogs, whatever, will you buy me this thing?" She didn't have to negotiate. She always lived even as bad as her life was with her mom, and as troubling and turbulent as her life was, she never once spent one day of her life wondering if her dad loved her. And I did. And I wondered if God loved me because I didn't think I was lovable. And she knew she was lovable. She ran and jumped on my lap and said, "Daddy, can I have a Barbie Jeep?" And she knew if I said yes, it was yes. And if I said no, the only reason I would say no was because it might not be good for her. And I would explain to her. Mm-hmm. And I started sobbing. I finally saw it. It was like, there it is the whole time, right under my nose. I've been looking for this big epiphany out somewhere in the world. And it was my own fatherhood. It was, and I wasn't the perfect dad, but I was a pretty good dad. I think I was a pretty good dad. And we were so close. She was Daddy's girl for sure, my only child. And I looked at that, and that's when it all changed for me. And I would challenge people that listen to just realize, he's not Oz. He's not the guy behind the curtain pulling levers and making smoke and fire come out. We think that, but he is wildly in love with us. He gets up before we do in the morning, and he's waiting for us to make a sound so he can come in the bedroom and pick us, like we did with our kids. Like, you remember when your kids were brand new and you couldn't wait to hear them rustle so you could go get them. And that's how he is with us. He's a dad first. Before he's all those other things, sending lightning bolts to punish and parting Red Seas, he's a dad first. He's a father. And once you get a grasp on that and see what kind of child you are, it's life-changing. It really is.
That's beautiful. Thanks. Well, thank you, Craig. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time and your stories, and God bless.
Thanks, Shari.